The unexpected reunion, the metronome on Ethan Walsh's desk, clicked rhythmically, an ironic counterpoint to the chaos of emotions he was barely containing. 3 cups of cold coffee sat untouched on his desk as he listened to the demo track 4. The 5th time, it wasn't bad, it just wasn't exceptional. Harmonic Records didn't sign artists who were merely not bad. Ms. Monroe, he called out, his voice carrying through the open door of his office. The clicking of modest heels approached, and Vivian Monroe appeared in the doorway. Her auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun, wire-rimmed glasses perched on her nose. Yes, Mr. Walsh. The Blackwood sisters Philew categorized them under folk revival when they clearly have bluegrass influences. The metadata needs to be precise. He gestured to the screen showing the company's digital archive system. I apologize, Vivian said quietly. I'll correct it immediately. Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying her. She'd been hired 3 weeks ago to organize the label's extensive music archive, physical recordings, digital files, contracts, everything. Harmonic Records had been operating for 15 years, and the filing system was a disaster before she arrived. She was efficient, knowledgeable about music, and worked late without complaint. She was also strangely reserved around him specifically. With other staff, she was quietly warm. With him, she was professional to the point of seeming cold. This is the 3rd classification error this week, he said. I need someone who intuitively understands music genres. Do you have the background? For this position, Ms. Monroe? Something flickered across her face. Not fear of losing her job, but something deeper. I assure you, Mr. Walsh, I understand music. These were simple oversights. Simple oversights can cost us credibility with artists. Ethan stood up and walked to the window overlooking downtown Nashville. I built this label from nothing. Every detail matters. I understand, she said, her voice steady. It won't happen again. See that it doesn't. I'll be reviewing your work more closely from now on. After she left, Ethan frowned. Something about her bothered him not. Just the errors, which were minor despite his reaction. There was something familiar about her, something he couldn't place. He prided himself on his memory, especially for faces and voices. In the music industry, those skills were invaluable. Later that evening, most of the staff had gone home. Ethan remained, listening to submissions from aspiring artists. Soft melody drifted down the hallway piano, played with remarkable sensitivity. He followed the sound to their small recording studio, where they sometimes let artists try out. The equipment, through the glass, he saw Vivian seated at the grand piano, eyes closed, fingers moving with practiced precision over the keys. The piece was hauntingly familiar, one of his own compositions from years ago, before he became a producer. A piece he'd written in college that had never been published. How did she know it? He pushed open the door, and Vivian's hands froze mid-phrase. She stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over the piano bench. Mr. Walsh, I'm sorry, I didn't think anyone was still here. I was just taking a short break. I'll get back to work immediately. That piece, he said slowly. Where did you learn it? She paled slightly. I don't remember exactly. It must have been in our archives. It's not, he said. It was never published. I wrote it. Perhaps. I heard it somewhere else then, she said, gathering her belongings. If you'll excuse me, I need to finish cataloging the 2010 to 2015 contracts before tomorrow. As she hurried past him, Ethan caught a whiff of her perfume, vanilla and amber with notes of jasmine. The scent triggered something in his memory, but before he could grasp it, she was gone. The next morning, Ethan called his HR director. I need everything we have on Vivian Monroe, he said without preamble. Resume, references, background check, everything. Is there a problem? The director asked. Just send me the file, Ethan replied. 20 minutes later, he was reviewing her application materials. Master's degree in library science with a specialization in music archiving. 3 years at the Boston Symphony Orchestra's archive. Excellent references. Nothing suspicious or remarkable, except for a 6-month gap in her employment history 3 years ago, with no explanation. By afternoon, Ethan had made up his mind. She knew too much about him that wasn't public knowledge. She was hiding something. And Harmonic Records couldn't afford security risks. He was headed to her office to deliver the news. When his phone rang, his lead talent scout with an emergency about their newest signing, By the time he resolved the issue, it was past 7, and he assumed Vivian had gone home. But light spilled from under her office door. He knocked once and entered without waiting for a response. The office was empty. But Vivian's computer was still on, a cup of tea steaming beside it. She'd stepped out but would be back soon. Ethan turned to leave when something caught his eye: an old, worn leather-bound journal on her desk, open to a page filled with handwritten music notation. He moved closer, recognizing the melody she'd been playing yesterday. Beneath the notation was a date from 12 years ago and an inscription: "For the harmony I never had the courage to complete." Ethan froze. Only one person had ever called him in that way. A talented pianist he'd met in his first year at Berklee College of Music. They'd been inseparable for nearly 2 years. Friends, collaborators, almost something morantal. She suddenly transferred to a different school without explanation, cutting all contact. Her name wasn't Vivian Monroe. Her name was Valerie Mitchell. Paper trails of the past. Ethan's hands trembled as he stared at the journal. Memories flooded back: late nights composing together in practice rooms, Valerie's laughter as she corrected his chord progressions, the way she always brought him coffee during finals week, how she'd disappeared without a word, leaving only rumors that she'd transferred to Juilliard. The sound of footsteps in the hallway jolted him back to reality. He stepped away from the desk just as Valerie entered, carrying a file folder. She stopped abruptly, her eyes darting from Ethan to the open journal on her desk. The color drained from her face. "You weren't supposed to see that," she said quietly. "Valerie." He spoke her real name with certainty. She closed the door behind her. "I go by Vivian now. Legally changed it after everything. You disappeared 12 years ago, not even a goodbye." Ethan's voice was controlled, but the hurt was evident. "And now you show up at my company under a different name?" Vivian set down the folder and removed her glasses, rubbing the bridge of her nose. Without them, her face was exactly as he remembered, just matured with time and experience. "I needed the job," she said simply. "Your HR director doesn't know our history. No one does. I needed work after the Boston Symphony cut positions, and I'm qualified. I didn't think you'd recognize me. You're playing my compositions, keeping journals with my initial, and you didn't think I'd figure it out." Anger edged into his voice. "Why are you really here, Valerie? Or should I call you Vivian? Which lie am I supposed to believe?" She flinched. "I'm not lying about my qualifications. The name change was years ago for personal reasons, and applying to work for me specifically, that was just coincidence." His tone was skeptical. "No," she admitted after a long pause. "It wasn't coincidence." Ethan waited, arms crossed. Vivian sighed, resignation washing over her features. She opened a drawer and removed a yellowed envelope, sealed but creased from age. "I wrote this to you the day I left Berklee," she said, holding it out to him. "I never had the courage to send it. When I saw the job posting at Harmonic Records, I thought maybe it was time you knew the truth." Ethan stared at the envelope, his name written in familiar handwriting that had once filled the margins of his music sheets with encouraging notes. "Read it," she urged softly. "Then if you still want me to leave, I will. No questions asked." With hesitant fingers, Ethan took the envelope. The paper was brittle with age, the seal coming loose as he carefully opened it. Inside was a single page, dated May 18th, 2013, the day before Valerie had vanished from his life. "Dear Ethan," it began. "By the time you read this, I'll be gone from Berklee and from Boston. I wish I could explain everything in person, but I'm not brave enough to see the disappointment in your eyes. My father has been diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Doctors give him 6 months. He's always sacrificed everything for my education, working multiple jobs so I could attend Berklee. Now he needs me, and I can't continue my studies while caring for him. I'm transferring to a school closer to home with a partial scholarship. It's not Berklee, and it's not with you, but it's the only choice I have. I never told you how much. You meant to me how your melodies completed my harmonies in ways I never thought possible. I was too afraid to risk our friendship for something more. Perhaps someday, when life is kinder, our paths will cross again. Until then, Know that the music we created together will always be the soundtrack of my happiest memories. All my love. Valerie. Ethan looked up from the letter, his expression unreadable. Your father has passed away 5 months after I wrote that, she said quietly. I spent every day with him until the end. Then I had to work to pay off the medical bills. By the time I could breathe again, years had passed. We're already building Harmonic Records, becoming a success. You could have reached out. What? Sorry I disappeared when we were at our closest. Want to pick up where we left off? She shook her head. I saw how driven you became after Berkeley. The industry articles about Ethan Walsh, the perfectionist producer who never compromises. I didn't want to be another obligation. Ethan carefully refolded the letter, processing everything. The room felt too small suddenly, the air too thick with unspoken words. Why keep this? He finally asked, tapping the journal. Why hold on to pieces of me all these years if you never intended to return? Vivian's eyes met his vulnerability. Replacing her usual reserve? Some harmonies stay with you, she said simply. Even when the song ends. Part 3. Unfolding truths. The silence between them stretched like an unresolved chord, tense with possibility. Outside the office windows, Nashville's evening lights flickered on. Casting a warm glow across the room, Ethan placed the letter on the desk between them. 12 years, Valerie. 12 years of wondering what I did wrong. You didn't do anything wrong, Vivian said. That was why leaving was so hard. You were perfect. Perfect. Laughed without humor. Is that why you couldn't tell me about your father? Did you think I wouldn't understand? Is that I wouldn't have supported you? She turned away, moving to the window. It wasn't that simple. My father didn't just need care. He needed financial support. The medical bills were astronomical. She paused. Professor Daniels at Juilliard offered me a full scholarship and a stipend if I transferred. It was enough to keep us afloat. Professor Daniels. Ethan's voice sharpened. The same Daniels who tried to recruit me, but I turned down? Vivian nodded slowly. He made it clear that the offer was contingent on me cutting ties with Berkeley completely. Said my attachment to you was holding back my potential, and you believed him. The hurt in Ethan's voice was palpable. I was 22, terrified of losing my father, and desperate, she said, turning back to face him. Daniels convinced me you were headed for commercial success while I needed to focus on classical purity. He said our musical paths were diverging anyway. Ethan's jaw tightened. Daniels was notorious for pitting talented students against each other. He wanted to separate us because together we were creating something innovative that didn't fit his classical mold. I realized that too late, Vivian admitted. After my father died, I tried to find you. But by then, you'd left the Boston scene entirely. Your number had changed, and your old email bounced back. I moved to Nashville right after graduation, Ethan said. I couldn't stay in Boston with all those memories. Vivian's eyes widened. You left because of me? Not entirely, he said. More gently now, but partly. Music wasn't the same after. You left. She reached for the journal, running her fingers over the notation. I followed your career. Every artist you signed, every award you won. I was proud of you, even from a distance. And you? Ethan asked. The Boston Symphony is prestigious. Why leave? A shadow crossed her face. Budget cuts were the official reason. But really it was Daniels again. He became their musical director 3 years ago and made it clear my position wouldn't last. He's still trying to control your path, Ethan said incredulously. Why I applied here, she admitted. I needed to work, yes, but also I needed to break free from his influence. And maybe what? Maybe make peace with the past, she finished softly. Even if you never knew who I really was. Composing a new melody the next day, Ethan arrived at the office earlier than usual. He'd barely slept, his mind replaying conversations from years ago, searching for clues he'd missed. The hurt and confusion had given way to a determination he hadn't felt in years. He placed a call to a music journalist he knew, who had connections at Juilliard. I need everything you can find on Professor Richard Daniels, he said, particularly his scholarship practices over the last 15 years. By noon, the information had arrived. Daniels had a pattern identifying talented duos or creative partnerships. then finding ways to separate them, offering scholarships or positions too. One while subtly undermining the other. The talented individuals he collected this way often had successful, but brief careers before fading into teaching positions, usually under Daniel's supervision. Ethan printed the email and walked to Vivian's office, knocking this time before. Entering. "I'm not firing you," he said without preamble. She looked up from her computer, surprised. "You're not?" "No. In fact, I'm promoting you." He handed her the printout. "I want you to head a new division at Harmonic. We're going to establish a mentorship program for young musical partnerships, duos, bands, collaborative songwriters, with scholarships that keep them together, not tear them apart." Vivian scanned the document, her expression shifting from confusion to understanding. "You want to prevent what happened to us?" she said quietly. "Yes, and I want you to run it because you understand exactly what's at stake." He sat down across from her, lest you'd rather go back to archiving. A smile tugged at her lips, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. "I think I could manage a promotion." "Good." He hesitated. "There's something else. I've been listening to our old compositions, the ones we never finished." "You kept them?" she asked, surprised. "Every single one." He pulled out his phone and played a recording, their last unfinished piece, but now complete. With new sections that complemented her original piano parts perfectly, tears welled in her eyes as she listened. "You finished it?" "No," he said softly. "I continued it. But it's still not finished. It needs your touch, your harmony." She held his gaze, understanding the metaphor. "Are you asking me to collaborate professionally, or—" "Both," he said simply. "If you're willing. We lost 12 years, Valerie, Vivian, whoever you want to be. I don't want to lose any more time wondering what might have been." The encore, 6 months later, Harmonic Records hosted its first showcase for the partnership program. The company's recording studio had been transformed for the evening. With soft lighting and rows of chairs facing the grand piano, Ethan stood at the microphone, addressing the room filled with industry professionals, young musicians, and music education advocates. "Music is rarely a solo journey," he said. "Behind every great artist is usually a collaborator, a partner, someone who brings balance to the composition. Tonight, we celebrate those partnerships." He gestured to Vivian, elegant in a simple black dress, who joined him at the front. "The Harmonic Partnership Program exists because of a lesson I learned the hard way," he continued. "Talent flourishes best when nurtured together, not divided. My partner in this initiative understands this better than anyone." Vivian took the microphone. "We've selected 5 musical partnerships for our inaugural program. They'll receive financial support, mentorship, and recording opportunities as pairs never to be separated." The audience applauded as the young musicians were introduced. After the formal presentations, as the room filled with conversation and the clinking of glasses, Ethan and Vivian slipped away to the smaller recording booth. "They're going to ask for a demonstration," Ethan said, sitting at the piano. "Are you ready?" Vivian smiled, taking the space beside him on the bench. "I've been ready for 12 years. Their fingers moved across the keys in perfect synchronization, creating a piece that spoke of separation, longing, and finally reunion. The melody they'd begun in college, interrupted by life, now flowed seamlessly into new passages that reflected their journey's separate paths converging once again. Through the glass, they could see their colleagues and the young musicians gathering, drawn by the music. But Ethan and Vivian were in their own world, communicating in the language that had first connected them. As the final notes faded, Vivian rested her head lightly on Ethan's shoulder. "What do we call this piece?" she asked softly. Ethan looked at her, at the woman who had once been the shy pianist Valerie, who had become the reserved archivist Vivian, and who was now simply herself, complex, talented, and finally where she belonged. "I think," he said, taking her hand in his, "we call it the encore." Their fingers intertwined on the piano keys, creating one final, perfect chord resolution, 12 years in the making.